So good evening and a very warm welcome on this winter evening on this really interesting and hot subject of masculinity and Mardangi. We have lined up a really interesting conversation with four very interesting people. This is the second live session which Fia is organizing in a series called Social on Social, where this month our focus is actually having curated conversations with men who come from different walks of life, and to understand and dive slightly deeper into their understanding as to how the concept and the idea of masculinity has impacted them in their personal life and journeys and the choices that they have made. Before we begin, I will actually like to highlight something about this panel. For people who, panel is basically the moderator and all the panelists are men. But I just want to say that this is a slightly different manner. Why and how this is different? For that, to get a sense of that, I would request people who have logged in to be slightly patient and be with us for the next 1 hour. And I definitely assure you that we will visit this question back towards the end before we conclude this session. As I said, today we have really four fascinating individuals who have joined us for this conversation. All of them come from very unique journeys. All of them have very different set of experiences. But instead of me introducing them, we are going to slightly follow a slightly different route, where I'm going to invite one by one each of these panelists who have joined us, and I'll request them to share slightly more about themselves, but not from the professional accolade space, but more from a personal space perspective as to what has been your journey, your family, your roots, your schooling, your college, and then maybe coming to your work. So we'll go as per what I can see on the screen. So maybe Rajesh, you can go first.
Hi everybody. Thank you, Ranjan and Pia Foundation for inviting me to be part of this. Very interesting topic. My name is Rajesh, and I'm from Western Orissa. There's this Kalahandi district in Orissa where I spent most of my youth years, actually childhood and youth years. So I spent about 19 years in Orissa, and Western Orissa. I belong to a farming community. And a feudal setup. And that's very relevant to what we're going to talk about today. But yeah, I mean, that's the space I come from. I studied botany, then, sort of got into development sector, got into, very interesting institutions. I studied in Jamia, then studied in Jawaharlal Nehru University. All these institutions also have a very sort of important roles to play in shaping my life as a whole. Currently, I'm working with ComMutiny, the youth collective, and Vartali. Both these entities are based out of Delhi, and largely we work with a large cohort of youth workers, youth engagers, institutions that work with young people and young people themselves. So for the past, I think 14-15 years, I've been in the youth development sector largely, and sort of learning from the workspace, also sort of in a way bringing my youth experiences into the field to really sort of shape how we create experiences for young people. That's me, Rajesh.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. Swastik.
Hey, thank you, Ranjan. Thank you for your foundation for this invite. I'm really glad to have come here, and again, we had some very interesting conversations with my co-panelists. It was very interesting to know about them as well. So I'm Swastik Choudhury. I come from Odisha. So basically, I have done my schooling, formative schooling and everything in Rourkela. I was born and brought up there. Post that, I did my engineering. So had a very typical view of the world, of about life, of just do engineering, then join some corporate, fly to some really advanced developed countries, as we call it, and then mint money. So that was how the whole perspective was there in my formative years. And but somehow during this corporate job itself, and when I was posted down south in Chennai, so I started observing that whenever we used to go and watch a film there, so mostly we means the people who are not the local people, who we used to always queue up for mostly the Hindi films or the non-Tamil films. But most of the people who are based out of that, they will always queue up for the Tamil films only while buying the tickets. And that got me thinking, when was the last time I saw an Odia film that's on my own language in a theater? So somehow there was some thoughts that went behind it. I moved back to Odisha, Bhubaneswar here. So I still work in a corporate parallelly in an IT sector as well. But majorly my focus in the last 10, 12 years has been to make films that too in Odia, which stands the test of time as I want to see them. And they travel to different festivals, to prominent platforms, and Odia cinema is also recognized the same way as we recognize or celebrate any other language of India, like be it a Malayalam films or a Bengali film or a Marathi film, for the matter of fact. So that has been my journey in the last 10 years. Has been a lot of learning. It has given me an opportunity to know a lot of people as well. So that's how I've been doing here. So thank you.
Thank you, Swastik. Joffin?
Thanks, Ranjan. Thanks to your foundation. Really happy to be here to have this conversation. Yeah, I mean, the question where you're from is a bit tricky when you're, coming from Mumbai, born to migrant parents. Do you say, do you kind of say Kerala, which is in my case is, the native place? Now you don't no longer use that word native place as much. But yeah, so I'm born to migrant parents, came in from Kerala. But yeah, I'm predominantly, I mean, I would identify as someone from Mumbai. So I've done all my schooling here, lived most of my life here. Yeah, it's been a life which has been quite colorful, different experiences, different kind of environments that I've been part of. So growing up, it's been, it's grown up in really difficult circumstances in terms of, back in the 90s, living in, like a one-room place. So earlier on, idea of personal space was a very alien concept growing up. Just very communal. So you just, as a child, you're just going in and out from, neighbors' houses. You just let, your senses guide you, sense of smell, where the food is cooking, and what you can see, and you go in and out. And yeah, and from there, doing schooling was in a Maharashtra housing board colony that I spent most of my, at least school years. And minority Catholic family, so that again gave a slightly different view, and in terms of experiences, which I make sense of now. Like growing up, you don't kind of register a lot of these things. When you look back, you're able to see, acha, this is probably why that happened. Experiences of some kind of marginalization or something. Went to boarding school, considering the circumstances, was also a bit disillusioned with, money, and, with the lack of it, and, started thinking about, okay, shayad ye paisa wala, scene is not my thing. So I did explore spiritual life. I did explore religious life. So I was away in the villages for a year. I was in, in Kudal, which is in Konkan, Maharashtra, for a year. Exploring whether that's the kind of life that I would like to kind of pursue, but that again had its own pros and cons. Came back, did my bachelor's in mathematics in St. Xavier's in Mumbai, and then again, because we have such poor career guidance systemically in our country, the question comes, what do you do now, right? Because my brother was doing engineering, like Swastik said, right? He was following that script, and I saw him suffer with that script, right? So I'm like, definitely, my parents don't have the money. Whatever money my dad had, he had to kind of, put in for my brother's education. So I don't want to be that next guy who's, facing that pressure. Sorry, yeah, and yeah. So then the question was, what do I do? So that's when the Gandhi Fellowship came, in my view, and came under the radar. And then I spent 2 years in Rajasthan, which again, somebody who has a South Indian background, going to North India, navigating that cultural space, had more intimate experiences of caste and gender in those spaces. So that again was something that really, opened my eyes to a lot of things, and something that I'm still processing in many ways, through my different explorations. Currently, again, not going into total biography, but now again, explored different kind of spaces, education, entrepreneurship, a certain sense of disillusion with some of those entrepreneurial projects, understanding what does the larger system look like. So currently working with Center for Social Impact and Philanthropy, where I'm in a way inquiring into some of those issues, right? Into the intersections of social impact, social change, careers, right? With the background of the climate crisis that we currently have, right? So what does it mean to kind of navigate these spaces with all our roles, right? Role as a partner, father, brother, caretaker, caregiver, and, and this kind of demand culturally to kind of also go up in life, backgrounding that with, with the kind of crisis that we all of us face systemically. So lots to kind of work through, and we're expected to be really, up to speed with all of it. So hope we can kind of navigate together into some of those questions, especially from this, lived experience of being a man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jochen. I think 3 people, 3 different scripts. Tarun, before we conclude this first piece of introduction, please. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ranjan, and thank you for your foundation. Extremely glad to be part of this panel, is what Ranjan pointed out initially. Okay, so the script is to talk about myself and my personal life. So I would start with where I live. I live in Faridabad. I've been born and brought up here. For people who don't know, Faridabad is part of the Delhi NCR. I would like to echo with Jochen, where he did mention about engineering as a norm of pursuing a career in that space, and I followed that norm only. I studied science and looked at other people and my peers and my friends trying to pursue the same sort of avenue. So I tried to do that as well, but essentially I realized at the right point in time that this is not meant for me, and I sort of dropped out of it. And when I look back, I think it was a good decision, and it was a decision solely taken by myself. So that was one chink in the armor, which I felt that was like, okay, you're doing good, you're moving in the right path. Going forward, I studied social work. I had no clue about social work. I incidentally got into it and studied social work in Jamia, and organically just pursued a career. And this is something that I love at this point in time. And and when I talk to my friends as well about it, it sort of paints. I sort of try and paint a picture where I do sort of honestly love what I'm doing. So extremely passionate about issues related to gender or youth work, and a new grown passion towards agri-based livelihoods is something that I'm trying to learn and build my understanding around it. So really glad to be part of this and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. I think the one thing which came across as a very common thread, at least one that, seen from 3 Idiots, where Mera Beta engineer banega, seems even in a small sample size to be very true in the Indian context. But also what stuck for me for all 4 of you was that in some cases, all of you kind of share the same thing about honoring the calling which you had and kind of pursuing it. So we will actually kind of come to that as to how easy or difficult that was for all of you. So the next thing which I really want to understand from all of you is that like the idea of masculinity or mardangi, as we call it, like when and how did that take shape in your personal lives? Like how did you start understanding this term personally for you, and how was that particular journey for you? So maybe Swastik, if you can begin this, and then we can hear from the others.
Well, to start with this idea of mardangi, so what has been entrusted through the popular culture, is that the one you are asking, or the actual idea of mardangi, what we got to know
how you kind of interacted with this like concept of mardangi personally? Like obviously, I mean, the popular culture plays a very pivotal role in how it kind of projects it. What has been your journey around it?
See, mostly it all comes to what has been our exposure to, right? And our exposure very easily it happens what is being thrown through the popular culture, through the popular narrative that you in today's time there is always this phones, the WhatsApps, the social media, and all is there to keep barging at your mind space with all these popular notions. And earlier back then when we were growing up, probably the the new age TV that had started, and with the new channels that had started to come. So mostly, see, first of all, that typical phrase, right, that ladke kabhi nahi rote hain. So that is something that really got ingrained in the very initial days, because I'm a very sensitive and emotional person by nature. Okay, and I find myself easily get emotional at things which touches me. And I was always having this while growing up. Also, I was always having this conflict by people all around me, surrounding me, always saying, "Ki, being a boy, how can you cry like that?" I said, why can't I cry? I also have eyes from which the tears also comes out. I mean, it's the same thing, like it should happen with anyone else. So that is something which was really what do you say, creating a lot of confusion, a lot of conflict, like how one should behave, or as a typically a boy, how one should behave. And the other thing is, like, you always see the many of those samples, like in a road rage kind of a thing. Like they will never want to resolve things in a very amicable way. So there has to be some kind of physical form of expression that has to happen, just to prove that you are man enough. So these are the things that I have typically seen while growing up, and especially when in a kind of a middle class family, we always see that there has to be one last command, or one last voice, which one said is done. That should be definitely of the father. Okay, the fatherly figure always, I mean, it overwhelms at times, but at times it is what it is. So that is how you keep on seeing every day on a day-to-day basis, and you feel that, okay, that is how it has to be. So while as you progress, and while you are meeting new people, trying to probably rediscover yourself, so in those times, and you try to read up a lot of things, you try to watch many neutral content as well, and then you start understanding that probably somewhere our upbringing, or the things that have shaped up within us, has not been the best possible way. I mean, there are better ways of how things has to be dealt with. There are better ways of how we need to understand. I mean, there are nuances everywhere, and somewhere we are trying to be very rigid when it comes to we calling out, like, a man has to behave in this way, man up, or this is not something constituted as a manly behavior. All these forms, okay. And the best probably is when you get exposed to that Jean-Luc Godard's film Masculine Feminine. Okay, so these are the avenues which I feel that when unless we impart the same kind of exposure to the younger generation, to the kids, or to the youth around us, so somewhere or the other, this particular sense of being a man, or the misconstrued sense of being a man, will always remain ingrained.
Thank you so much, Swastik. And but like you mentioned about boys don't cry, I think that is one of the most commonly used expression when this subject of masculinity in the recent past has been kind of dwelled upon. So Tarun, I mean, apart from that particular piece, was there anything else that while you were growing up that you were asked not to do because of the sex that you were born into, which you kind of remember and which you kind of did not really kind of agree with?
Yeah, I wouldn't say at that point in time I had the understanding of agreeing or not agreeing to it. I just went with the flow, I would assume. One of the key milestones in my life was and which sort of shaped my whole understanding and the way I would lead my life further was my father passed away at a certain point in time, and I was just starting college at that point in time. And incidentally, my mother was financially independent. So she was able to look after her, after me, etc., etc. But the common notion that I heard was I have to take care of everything. And this is me at 18 years of age hearing from people around me that I need to take care of everything around me. And this is consciously what I heard from elders, from a lot of people in the family, etc. Organically, what I understood was I can't show emotions. Perhaps I need to show strength. I need to I need to show it to the other people that I am capable of sort of looking after everything, and be a man in that sense, you know. So that was one thing that sort of shaped the way I looked at my life later on. And now when I look back and I realize it's a huge burden to actually to actually carry. I didn't realize it at that point in time, honestly. But now when I look back, I would sort of pat my back and say, okay, I mean, this is something that perhaps I did. So yeah, I mean, that's consciously what my takeaway was. You have to show strength, basis my sex in that ways. And I can't be emotional. I can't show emotions. If I show emotions, then I would be perceived in a certain way, which may help me or not help me, but would not lead me anywhere. Yeah, so that's just one bit that I did face.
That's really tough at 18, being asked to take care of a family. I mean, can't imagine how difficult it must have been. But yeah, now that you're looking back and you have so many years of wisdom now, slightly unfair to be even having that kind of an expectation from a teenager. But we are here to kind of actually decode such notions as to why do they even exist. Rajesh, I mean, you have had a very interesting journey. Thank you, like when you shared. So the choices that you have made are very unique in that sense. I mean, coming from the place that you are. So like, what in your journey were the pivotal points where this idea of masculinity kind of took shape and form?
Like I said, in my sort of introductory section, I belong to a very feudal setup. I think for me, while growing up, I think looking at how everybody sort of functioned, that played a very, very important role because I wasn't exposed, I didn't have the means of exposure in terms of media, in terms of TV. I was in a rural village, which is completely cut off. I'm talking about 80s and 90s, actually. It might sound very ancient, but that's how it was, first TV that came to my village was in 98 or 99, and till 2005, 2006, we didn't have an idea of how the world sort of functions. So for me, my immediate surrounding played a very, very important role in sort of giving me this assumption, this idea that this is how you are supposed to behave or be. I think my way of being, I think masculinity is also very, I consider masculinity as a way of being, rather because it's very, there is a, we sometimes tend to go into the gender roles. I think this there's this very gray sort of zone there. For me, I think the way of being was mostly just observing people around me. I think it wasn't about men or women. I think everybody's sort of played roles in a way where they were trying to sort of position certain kind of norm on an everyday basis. For instance, I was in a all boys school. That played a very, very huge role in my understanding of what a boys sort of how boys should be. I entire schooling days I was in all boys school. That I was very thin, by the way. Right now also, my entire body was I was very lanky, and everybody would like eat more, do exercise, do this, you need to bulk up, this, that, muscle banana padega tumhe. I wanted to get into NCC, I wanted to get into sports, but I couldn't because physically I was very, very thin, and and I was sort of looked at a certain way because of body traits also, but the expectation that because you are a boy, you should be like this, you should be doing ABCD EFGH. That's when you are actually truly a boy. So I think those expectations were always there. Even if it wasn't said, you look into someone's eyes and you're like, okay, this is what you are expecting, me to behave or me to be like, and I think back then it also felt a lot of, I felt a lot of pressure for sure. I think, there was constant pressure to really be the topper in school, be the person who goes out and sort of, buys grocery, be the person to really, I think in growing up, remember, I cannot imagine for a 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old boy to really think about, security, think about safety, think about, providing in some way, being useful in a very, household setup. So yeah, I think those were very sort of, interesting, nuanced expectations that were placed on me. And, I sort of navigated through that somehow. I actually survived all of those expectations in some way. And I think by the time I realized that, okay, I think I didn't have any kind of agency in terms of choosing what to do till a certain age. I might talk about it later, but I think to really, share, about your question, Ranjan, I think it was all those, unspoken, subtle sort of expectations that everybody around me had on me. I think those shaped, my sort of earlier years of how I, sort of considered myself to be a boy, or, a very, 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 very interesting sort of space. Thanks for that question, Ranjan.
In fact, when you mentioned boys' school, I think Swastik and me were like looking at you and we were like, we understand the pain because we have gone through that.
We should ban all boys' school. We should ban.
That should be a different conversation altogether, just on what happens when boys study in boys' school for 12 years.
Yeah.
It itself has a different...
It's a trauma.
Altogether. It's a different
So
kind of...
first thing is that the moment you go to a co-ed, after that, probably in the college, you first get a cultural shock.
Yeah, I don't remember my 11th and 12th because I don't remember those 2 years.
Backed out so much of trauma. But so Jonathan, I mean, we have heard like 3 people who have shared like their individual experiences at different points in life. So for you, I mean, you shared about like the thing about personal space while growing up. And so what were those like incidents or moments looking back now where this idea of masculinity kind of started taking shape, or like you understood it in a particular way?
Yeah, I've had a bit of a strange kind of relationship with the idea of masculinity, because again, I think growing up, you are never exposed to it explicitly, right? I mean, no one discussed today, yeah, this is what it means to be a man. Like no one really sits with you, mardangi aise karo. I mean, but because the culture is so natural, right? And that's the thing about anything that is, hegemony, anything that is dominant, right? It presents itself as something natural. Right? It's very natural. I mean, so if you're a man, all these things are very natural. I mean, the way you move around the world, the way you navigate public spaces, the way you say, even exert your presence in different places, these are natural. I mean, it's when you talk to women later on, after we've gone through our schooling with all the boys around us or whatever, when you start, so even by the way, even I've been in a boys' school. But I'll tell you what's
coincidental, by the way.
Yeah, but I'll tell you the difference. The difference is because I was also raised Catholic. I was in a church environment where we had interactions with people of the opposite gender, right? So that was addressed. The fact that that you don't have those kind of interactions in school, it's kind of addressed in a different space of community, right? With a common kind of umbrella. But yeah, no one really it's when you talk to women later on or whatever, right? And depending when you have those conversations, that you realize how difficult it is for those who do not identify as men to kind of navigate certain spaces, right? Even simple things as leaving, very, very simple thing that we take for granted, right? Leaving a friend's place at a certain time, right? Depending which city you are in, right? And that's also like massive, right? So like even my partner, I mean, we are in Mumbai right now. But Delhi, like for her parents, it's unimaginable that she would leave somebody's house at 9, 10. While in Mumbai, it might be slightly, like culturally, because it's seen differently. I mean, it's fine. I mean, like the safety, as a norm is like slightly different compared to in Delhi, where, leaving after a certain time is seen as risky, if not anything. And I mean, leaving after a certain point in time is seen risky for men as well, beyond a certain point. So I'm saying navigating those spaces, right, as a man is something you don't consider it right at the get-go. But for me, growing up, I think it was more about, because I've seen, I think as a family, gone through, struggles of, say, insecurity, both social, economic as well. So I think, so my father had to take an early retirement, because his company was going to get shut down. And that really kind of, was quite a kind of burden on him. I mean, he's also navigating or, negotiating his own mental health challenges, right? So that came as a big dhakka, right? And I think for me, like in terms of who was the head of the house, it's been my mother mostly, so in terms of was it a, a father figure, male figure? No, there was no real strong, the stereotypical strong figure that you like, that, Swastik spoke about, right? At the final word. For me, it was my mother at home. So she's the one who modeled care, caregiving, caretaking, all of that, right? Navigating uncertainties, getting things done, taking care of the kids, taking care of the partner, she relied on her siblings, so, but today when I look back, right? Today, when I look back, I mean, back then, obviously, you're not seeing all of that, right? You're not processing that. I mean, what I look back is, when I look back, is I look at two people. One person who was trying to really perform masculinity, was bearing the brunt of, of having to perform masculinity. And another person also trying to, be that caregiver, which is an expectation of out of femininity, of women, right? This whole burden of care that ends up coming, on mothers, of caregiving. So I see how patriarchy has affected both, right? If you're looking at it as a binary, I mean, men have to face the pressure of performing masculinity. I use that word very deliberately. And, for women to perform whatever, femininity, whatever it means right now, right? So, yeah, I mean, I know there were other reflections to make on other questions, so we'll come to that. But I think for me, the fact is patriarchy affects all of us, right, in different ways. So I think for me, that has been the more overarching kind of concern. How does it affect us today? And what does that mean, right? So, for example, ambition, right? I've constantly had to reframe that as a value for myself, right? So growing up, ambition, I looked at it very skeptically, right? Like making money, like I looked at it in a slightly negative lens coming from my background. And then I had to reframe it to niche. Because when I came back from, say, that year in, I won't say exile, but basically in reflection, where I was living a life of community, where I was not using my own money. I was, we were working in the field. We were, trying to get a gauge of culture. We had lessons and all of that. It was non-academic, learning about Indian culture, learning about the Bible for that matter, and working with communities there. It was a very different orientation to the life that I saw when I came out, right? When I came to college, where I was like, whoa, what are these people? I felt old suddenly, because these guys were like trying to get things done. I'm talking about, first year in college, right? Really, tuned to what they need to get things, like where they want to go, really clear about the path they want to take, really ambitious. So then I had to really reconfigure, my own orientation to the world, what does this mean to me now, right? So over time, that has also changed now. So right now for me, again, I've made that word ambition little problematic for myself and for others, right? What does it mean to be ambitious today in the kind of organizations, in the kind of structures we are part of? And how does that affect all of us, right? So for me, a provocation, if I can dare to be deliberately provocative, is like, irrespective of our gender, I think many of us are forced to man up, right? Irrespective of our gender. So I mean, it's a provocation. I deliberately do that. But our notions of rationality, our notions of what does it mean to be vulnerable, what does it mean to be ambitious, despite the cost, the cost that we don't count, right, in going up or whatever, and hierarchical spaces that we are part of. So for me, I'm deliberately putting it out there, but I mean, manning up affects all of us.
It does.
However we frame. Yeah.
And I think the scope and space for the idea of failure is almost non-existent, particularly in the masculine structure. If you look at it, I think, as you mentioned, I mean, when you went back and you had to do something, because people have to be clear. I mean, there is no scope of not knowing what you would do, because that is not technically allowed in that framework. The term man up came up quite a few times while everyone was speaking. So any particular incidents which any one of you remember where you had to man up to a particular thing, or something which kind of you were really keen on doing, but you were not allowed to because of the way the setup was, the unspoken setup around you, or the ecosystem around you. And you had to manage to prove a point, or to just kind of even be accepted, let's say.
So, see, just now you mentioned, right, that the scope for failure or the margin of failure, again, that also comes down, right? So that somewhere comes from all those, as I think what Jofin was saying, right, that we are all conditioned in some way that as a man, somebody has to be a caregiver, or somebody has to, I mean, there's a lot of this Mardangi related things which is already conditioned, comes as very natural, right? So when you're living all the time around that kind of thoughts surrounding you, so obviously the scope for failure or experimenting and failing and trying to do something becomes obviously less, because you are always being questioned, or you are always under the lens where people want you to be stable so that you can make others comfortable and make them stable as well. Okay, so just give me 1 second. Yeah, so that's where the whole idea of trying to chart a different path, especially when, as per the social norms, you have already ticked all those check boxes. Okay, you did one of the most probably successful courses, that engineering. Okay, that engineering or doctor, which generally medical that people do. So you have done engineering. Okay, you got a campus selection and you got a job. So you are ticking all those check boxes, and then you are now supposed to lead that settled life. Okay, you've got a job. You are now getting a salary. Now you should get married, and you just lead a settled life. That's it. Game over. You don't have to think about anything else. Now, suppose that when you start making a statement or trying to communicate that I want to do something different, probably you will not say it explicitly, but by the activities that you start doing, so people around you, initially they will feel very tensed or concerned, or in a very, look at it in a very uh, in a doubtful way of what is this guy trying to do, why he has to do. I mean, all the check boxes have already been ticked. So what is the need to rewrite the script again? What is the need to reinvent the wheel again? So this is obviously this question comes up, and at times, like in my case, probably my wife was very much considerate about it. So that's a blessing in disguise. But you don't have like parents and there are relatives and everybody who every now and then comes up and say that why do you need to do that in a very initial period, because it takes away a lot of your time and effort, especially when you are juggling between two professional things, and you are not available for the family, you are not available for any kind of social gatherings, you are not available for those regular chit chat, gupshups, phone calls, and all the stuff. So people start wondering, like, what's wrong with you? Why you need to do all of that? I mean, everything was going fine as per the predefined template. So that is something really we are not tuned to. We are not probably given any kind of a guidance or any kind of understanding during the formative years that you are allowed to experiment, you are allowed to discover yourself, you are allowed to actually go and seek new paths, understand yourself. So it is basically that these are the steps. I think probably Rajesh mentioned, right, that A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So these are the steps. And this is what your brother did, or this is what your so-and-so person did, your cousin did. Now you should just follow that, and that's it. So obviously, so this gives rise to a lot of conflict. And how do you deal with it? So probably to the more reasonable ones, you try to have a dialogue, and to the rest, you probably just be the stubborn yourself and move on. I mean, keep doing what you are doing. Because at times I've realized at a particular point of time, when you start seeing yourself more satisfied or more comfortable in what the alternate path that you have been trying to discover, and people see that you are adding value to that, so somewhere they will also realize that, okay, so this is something which is what giving you satisfaction about. But then initially, I mean, it is always going to be a tough journey.
it's very interesting, so I remember myself succumbing to, I wouldn't say pressure, but just an expectation. You look around and you see in people's eyes that maybe you should do this, that's the kind of a voice that sort of ऐसे नीचे से वो मूवी है ना, कोई एक मूवी शाहरुख खान का जब बजता है पीछे से ऐसे लोग नाचते हैं, like that, and it's very, very interesting, and it's almost like you don't have control over yourself, you just got to do that. I think that's the kind of urge that you feel, when I was talking about it's masculinity is a way of being, I was meaning this, so all my life I have played a very, very significant role as a crisis manager all the time. घर में नलका टूट गया, who will fix this? This one guy called Rajesh. घर में washing machine कुछ खराब हो गया, कौन धोएगा? ये धोएगा. The very, very specific things that demand your attention, even if you don't want to do. पंखा चला गया, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, कोई भी रिस्की काम जो है ना, वो घूम फिर के आई थिंक इसी का ही रोल के दायरे में आता है, ऐसा ऑटोमेटिकली हो जाता है. सो एनी starting from a very, very small sort of equipment related matters to big events, eventually you are at the center of managing that crisis. And I don't know how it happens. I think it happens to me all the time. And sometimes when I realize, you take a step back, everything is over, the crisis is handled or whatever, and you take a step back and you see, did that situation really require me to play the kind of role that I played? Could it have been something else? What would happen अगर मैं वहाँ नहीं जाता तो क्या होता? And it also almost feels like, am I occupying more space than needed? So these are all reflections that come to your mind, and I'm not talking about only big events or big spaces. I think छोटी-छोटी चीजों में, even in relationships with your brother, with your sister, with your parents, with your friends, with your peers, वहाँ पे लड़की दोस्त हैं, लड़के दोस्त हैं, वहाँ पे you are a certain way. In public spaces you are a certain way. Everywhere you are this constant sort of tag lagaye घूम रहे हैं, crisis manager. It's frustrating, and also there is hero worship in that. Oh great, he did this. That also comes, and it validates your behavior further, and it basically cements that way of life for you for a very, very long time, unless you consciously choose to not engage or get away or do something about it. So that's the danger there. There is a lot of validation also for demonstrating certain kind of masculine behavior. That's generally sort of expected. So yeah, I mean, very, very, very tough to really negotiate this space. If you don't do anything, like, what is this man not doing anything? If you do something, but वो भी कहीं पे एक danger zone है.
Yeah, if I can just add to what Rajesh was saying, I think if we start talking about situations in our life, then we'll sort of end up talking
for hours.
But I think the natural essence is there is a natural dependency on us, right, to perform certain roles by virtue of our gender in that sense. And what usually happens is there comes a tipping point, and if you don't sort of sense it that it is coming, then it will break you in a certain way, and that is a point which becomes difficult to manage, because if you try to retaliate at that point in time, then you are termed as someone breaking the lines, right? Then sort of all hell breaks loose, and there's a lot of conversation about why this is happening or why that is happening. So I think what the point around validation is, if you yourself don't realize that this is leading to a certain tipping point which will break your own self, your own sense of self, and you stop validating it, then it sort of would help you in a certain way and also help people around you to understand it a little better. But if you keep on performing those roles, it'll keep on validating it to the point where it sort of breaks. And I think that's where we are trying to manage manage masculinity in a sense as well.
Absolutely.
And by the time you realize, it's already too late. Already we have crossed 30s.
It's not too late if you're looking at it and reflecting and kind of making those adjustments for the next time it kind of occurs. But I think, Rajesh, you used a term which was occupying more space than what is required. And even the awareness for something like that is so rare in that context. Like most of the times, it is just the more normal way to be, where it is just expected that men need to occupy that space. Most of the times it is much more than what they need to, but that's how it is. But yeah, and then Tarun was talking about like that hard line to break. The campaign that we are doing, not trying to publicize it, but we have called it Break the Mold because of the precise reason that these unsaid notions are so strongly kind of molds personalities and personas that the moment you try and break away from them, the repercussion at times are like really staunch. Joffin, I mean, would you want to share any particular instances personally from your life where you also felt that maybe because of the gender or the sex that you belong to, that you were also occupying more space either in a relationship or in circumstances where it was just expected, but later on you realize that, I mean, I could have not taken up that much space. I could have done or gone about it differently.
Not a specific instance. Again, like, Tarun said, I mean, there could be too many instances. Like I'm the tech support guy in the family as well, right? I mean, I'm sure I was going to ask Rajesh. Yeah, I'm sure even you're the guy. Any issues with the mobile, anything happens, they will come to you, right? Because you're the guy.
I support.
Like,
I see all of you. I
see all of you smile. I see Swastik as well smile and laugh. I'm sure someone's from his family has reached out to him.
So until you have said this, Joffrey, it never occurred actually, right? I mean, these are all very natural things. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So you're the guy who'd know that, or for whatever, because of your age, because of you're the the man and who is acquainted with all of these technologies and working with all of these things. But yeah, I think I actually wanted to kind of focus on the fact that it's tricky, like Rajesh said, right? I mean, it's very tricky space to navigate because I'm not just a man, right? But the moment you they're trying to break the mold, but the mold is also a little, it's funky. It's not just very, very plain or pure mixture, right? It's not it's got certain other bits, right? I mean, I'm not just a man. I also come from a minority group for that matter, right? I mean, where am I living? What's the geography? What's the, how does that kind of position me, right? I'm also, I just want to kind of focus on the notion of intersectionality, right? The fact that, we have a lot of different orientations. The fact that I'm also like, I'm a man, but I'm also the second born, which puts a very different kind of pressure, right? The fact that, like Swastik said, right? Yes, we can explore, but the fact for me is, my brother had to play the more traditional role of being the man, right? Because he had the added pressure of being the firstborn. So the pressure on me is, okay, how do I not be a constraint on resources? How do I not be a burden? But at the same time, I was able to navigate certain other things because my brother is doing the traditional thing. So mere pe ye aa gaya ki ek moral ye aa gaya ki while he's doing that, I should be looking at other things and also not spend too much money because resources have been have already been spent. So I don't want to be the other burden. So I'm saying all these things have a very different effect on you as a person, right? You're not just a man, you're all of these things, right? I mean, you're also dealing with issues of self-esteem because of the kind of background you come from, the kind of spaces you navigate. Language, luckily, has been one of those things because I was in a convent school. Angrezi aati, lekin, from a class perspective, no, I don't share, say, I come from a more lower middle class background, right? So having to navigate what that actually means in different spaces. How do you code switch? How do you kind of try and understand where the other person is coming from? So many accommodations that I've had to make, right? Which is, I don't know if it's like, it's something that people generally do, right? Coming from different spaces. But I've had to do that as a man and as somebody who comes from, a certain background as well. So I think it's very tricky, but the moment you kind of incorporate all of this, then again, the question is, right? The question then does not become just about masculinity. It becomes about what is patriarchy doing with all of us in a way, right? The fact that certain identities are privileged. Yes, I am privileged as a man in a lot of spaces. But my approach to the world is not purely as a man, right? I mean, there are different standpoints. So for me, it's been a journey, about learning how to care differently. Like also Rajesh said, right? I mean, even caring in different ways, right? Even caring is gendered, right? Certain forms of care that men assume, and certain forms of care that, women have to assume, right? I mean, father, I mean, again, the stereotypical thing, right? Kamane ka kaam, baki sab, mothers, cooking ho gaya, jo bhi ho. I mean, I'm talking about, pure patriarchal kind of systems where this is how it works. But we see that, changing. We see so much of that changing now, right? I mean, men themselves having to navigate, what does it mean when both the partners are working? Again,
Right.
keeping it limited to a nuclear family, kind of setup, or, heteronormative setup. I mean, the point is ki, yes, even men having to navigate because they're grown with a certain orientation. And now you have to kind of also be critical, or, trying to figure out ki, yaar, why do I feel angry? Say the moment, like, see, if I have to do something that maybe deep in my head I've associated with as a woman, as a woman's job, right? Anger aata hai, irritation shayad aata hai, so for me, trying to kind of navigate that, or trying to even understand what does it mean to care differently, is has been a process of learning, and it's ongoing, right? I mean, for me, to care is to learn right now, learn more about, who you are, more about where the other person is coming from. So for me, that has been the process, whether it's, engaging with literature, with more feminist literature, understanding different ways of being, like, being a person is a way of being, Rajesh said, right? So, but there are different ways of being. So understanding that, and how does that help, so there are movies, right? There's art, right? There's books. So which is why art is so important, right? Where we kind of get that taste of different ways of being, and why representation in arts is important, in different spaces is important. But yeah, so I mean, I'm sure there are other questions, but we can kind of address some of those. But this has been my overarching kind of premise, yeah, caring, caring as a way of, learning more about caring. How do you do that? So yeah.
So, you said something which is a truth, which is basically a non-debatable truth, that men are more privileged. I mean, that is definitely there just by virtue of the body that we occupy. But having said that, there is also, it's just understood that we also are just more naturally more open to choose whatever we want to do, like men in general. But as at least I personally have evolved, my understanding of the subject and the context have evolved, is it, as compared to women, definitely yes. But is it really like do we really have that freedom to choose? Or even those choices are again kind of boxed, and it has to be kind of represented in that framework, which is also predefined in some sense? Like what has been your personal experiences around that, of like freedom to actually choose what you want to do? While you all have, like today when we're talking and this session is happening, you have chosen different paths for your own self. But what was that space where you actually had to make that choice, and what kind of negotiations did you have to do? So maybe Tarun, if you can go first, and then.
Yeah, I think a straight answer maybe would be yes, there is a certain choice, but the choice is limited, I assume. And this is something that I've learned from what has happened with me in the past. So for example, I had the choice of dropping out of engineering and pursuing something else, right? Was it an easy choice to make? No. Did I have to face retaliation from a lot of people? Yes. But it was still something which was in my arc, and I could sort of choose it in that ways, right? But when it comes to other stuff, when it comes to looking after a family, as an expectation, did I have a choice there? Maybe yes, maybe no. But I think I was more propelled naturally towards making a choice of looking after the family and being that person, being the man of the family, for example, right? Which has also led to a lot of dependency to what Rajesh was mentioning earlier, right? Because I chose to be a certain way, because I chose to be the man of the family, naturally a lot of things were diverted towards me in terms of, you are required to be to perform certain duties basis your gender. So it's always and I believe at every point in time we are making certain choices. These choices would either validate uh, our behaviors towards masculinity, or it may not. But essentially, there are always choices that we are making, right? So, and it's a tricky point to sort of talk about right now, because there's no defined rule. Essentially the idea is to be honest with yourself, and perform whatever you are required to perform, right? But there is always a choice, is what I would essentially say.
Well, the topic is tricky, so the subject and the questions are also kind of tricky. But yeah, I mean, the idea is to also like kind of simplify it and understand it for our own selves as to how, I mean, different people have approached it. Rajesh, I mean, what has been your take on this?
It's a very, very interesting question, Ranjan. I think, I was just thinking about it when you asked that question again. No, I was like, I think in my case, anything that had a direct impact on me personally, I think it was easy to choose those things. For instance, this is what I want to study. I don't care what everybody else thinks. This is what I want to work on. This is what I, want to choose as my career. Of course, people had opinions, but those opinions affected me a bit, but not too much. I think I was, after a point, I think just after 12th, I was like, as I had this really hard shell on around me, and nothing would sort of enter that shell. Things like, not choosing to get married at a certain age, not choosing to, sort of have a family, the conventional family, all those choices have a direct impact on me. I don't think, people might think that these things have an impact on them, but not directly, actually. They are just feeling it like that. But there are some choices that, I believe I can take, but I also feel a certain kind of pressure in not choosing otherwise. I think, for example, right now my father is retired, and I feel a sense of responsibility to the family in terms of providing financially. I have two other sisters, both of them are studying. One is looking for a job. All of that thing is also there, but I think there is uh, a huge pressure, and I don't have a choice of getting out. I can say, I don't care, do whatever you want to do, I'm out. I can't say that, because of that obligation, because of that love or whatever you have. I think those are the binding sort of principles, or your feelings that sort of trap you into choosing something you may not feel great about, but you are choosing it because you feel like you don't have any other choice. So I think there are many choices that I have taken that I didn't want to. Actually, I really didn't want to, but I had to because of whatever circumstances. And there are choices that I've taken that it's just about me, and it doesn't have any bearing on anybody else. So yeah, I think just to sum up your question, I think it varies from people to people also. I think somebody else in my shoes may do something, may choose differently, but right now that's where I am at the moment. Yeah,
I think both Tarun and you kind of at least the fact that there is an acknowledgement and an understanding that as men we have been you in this case have been able to take certain choices technically slightly more easily, that with regards to which were related directly to you, like as he mentioned, like dropping out, or you
in comparison to my sisters. Yes, I think those choices have been really easy for me, really easy for me. For my sisters, they had to really work extra hard to get those choices, really extra hard. I was away. I could stay in Delhi. I left my home at 19. When I was 19, I could do that easily. Not my sisters. They stepped out of home when they were 25 or 26. and constant safety and security issue and all of that. So I think choices wise, of course,
Yeah,
there is a realm that
there are one set of choices which are still easier to make,
yeah,
but there are these other also as important choices which, while you might want to do it differently, but you're doing it for some reasons. And Swastik, I mean, you have taken one of the most interesting routes from, like, as you mentioned, a very perfectly defined template. You left that template and you went into something which a lot of people might not have chosen. So when you made that choice, when you made that conscious decision of shifting and pursuing something which you were not born into, technically, I mean, it's not that your family was into this particular stream of arts or business per se. So what was that for you, and what were the key negotiations that you had to do personally in the personal space to make that transition?
So see, basically, as I mean, other panelists also say that, right? So probably because of the gender, so we certainly have a better agency to make choices as compared to the opposite gender. Say, for example, if I have to go for a meeting, say even at around 9 p.m., probably I will just go out. That's okay. But I also at times wonder if the opposite gender, in my case, if my wife would have also pursued something like this, and we both would have had this odd hours, I mean, to work, and how things would have panned out, I don't know. Like in terms of how our near relatives and all your family members would have reacted to it, I don't know. But yeah, in my case, since I started, so somewhere my wife was playing a little bit of an anchor of a role at home. No, it was not at all easy when see, at times people, you always, when you start something new, you always start small, right? So even if I start a business, so probably I'll start doing something very small, and probably then probably try to grow in that. So when you started small in this field, in the field of filmmaking and all, so you start making short films to test like what you are doing, whether that is what you want to do. You have not been to a film school, so those making those short films or those phase is what your schooling is in terms of cinema. And then you get it validated through different ways. You learn from those mistakes and all. So when you are in that phase, so probably people are saying that, okay, chalo, hobby ke liye kar raha hai, kuch ek kar raha hai. Because short films, chota film hai, to chota hobby hai, to something like that. Okay. So people don't give that much of a attention or bhav. Aur kuch kar raha hai apne time pe, theek hai. Now, suddenly you see that certain validations has happened. You have tasted some bit of, if you, for the lack of better word, I'll say some bit of positivity, success, you can say. The people have appreciated your work and all. And then you now try to make a bigger film, or maybe a feature film, or you try to expand your canvas. So earlier, like our earlier films were, though many people appreciated that they discovered this Bhubaneswar and all this in a different way in our earlier films, because most of the films were shot around that region. And then suddenly you are also saving up money and all for a certain kind of a film where you are traveling, you are traveling to a neighboring state to shoot a certain portion. You are doing something else in a remote village far away from this capital city, and then traveling overnight to do that and all. And then suddenly people are starting to question you कि इसका क्या जरूरत है? मतलब you're doing something for a hobby, छोटा छोटा चीज कर रहे थे, so you should be okay with that at least. But now, so these are the things where the real that handling of those expectations and handling of those questions begins to rise. And what you respond at times, at times you really feel frustrated by certain questions, by certain people at certain point of time. And there have been a lot of challenges in terms of making yourself understood. It's not easy because, as you said, and again, for Jofin, I am also a second born. So my elder brother also has followed a very typical template, and everybody is fine, right? So a lot of question comes from those angles as well. Like you are just wasting money, you are wasting time, can't even give time to your family. And then you are going to so and so place. Why you are going alone? Why you can't take the entire family? I said, boss, I'm not going for a vacation. So It's not possible to take everybody to everywhere. So the whole idea of family to an extent also, this is where I also keep thinking, is that everything has to happen together. It cannot be like happen, okay, so if I am in XYZ location or in XYZ geographical place, and if my partner is some other place, so that doesn't constitute as a family. It cannot be termed as a family. I mean, that's a normal notion, right? And you have to make, somehow you feel that urge to make everything make yourself understood, and as well as make the situation, I mean, understand others, make them understand the situation as well, but it doesn't happen. So after a point of time, you realize that it is also a futile exercise. And as I say, to the considerable ones, to the reasonable ones, you can still discuss and make them understand. But after a certain point of time, you just have to go with the flow and keep doing what you want to do. At some time, you hope and you expect that they will probably realize the whole effort behind it. Because you see, as I am juggling between two professions again, so my work ends of one profession, and then I start about the cinema after that late evening, and it goes stretches up till, say, well past midnight and all. And it has been a regular phenomenon for the last so many years. I try to utilize all my weekends, all my holidays and everything. Even if I have to take a leave for health issues and all, I try not to take as much as possible, so that I save it up, so that for someday for making films and all, if I require to travel or somewhere, I can do that. So people don't understand this particular thing. I mean, they want you to follow this, so the basic, if this happens, if A happens, then this is what you should do as B, as an answer to that, or as a solution to that. But you are trying to redefine certain things. You don't try to go by what has already been followed by everybody. So that is where all the conflict arises.
I think also looking at the time, and given that some of the panelists have to kind of wind up, and also looking at the audience who would have been there. So I would request Dipit, if there are any questions, if you can share that with me. But the one last thing which I would like to ask all the four people is that we spoke about various aspects of masculinity and how it has kind of, how you have come to terms with it in your own lives and the experience that you have had. But Joffin touched upon that word care. And while that is looked upon as an aberration, right? I mean, a man is supposed to be dominating, assertive, always in control. And here we are talking to men who are trying to do it differently, where you're prioritizing love, care, and empathy. So what would you say as the parting, like the last words, if you all take a minute maybe, and share that, what would be your, for the lack of a better word, mantra to kind of normalize this approach? How have you guys gone about it? And what would be your mantra for the people listening in? Joffin, maybe we can start with you with this one.
Sure. Yeah, so the challenge is to maintain, right, the identities we care about. So, I mean, I kind of shared my mantra in a way. I mean, so to truly care is to care about learning more about, our place in the world, right? I mean, and how we want to be. So, yeah, so whether that is books, whatever those mediums are, right? Volunteering, talking to people and women, especially who are not, who come with certain lived experiences of oppression and discrimination. Yeah, so that's how you expand, your own ideas of it. So yeah, so to truly care is to care about learning, is to learn. That's my mantra.
Rajesh?
I don't think there is one mantra. But yeah, I think it's a journey. I guess I think there is no one sort of way of figuring this out, because this is manifested across the world. I don't think it's just about India or any other country. I think to be really, I think something that I am trying to sort of figure out in my own life is listening to people more. I think being a good listener to what people are talking about, people are sharing, especially relationships. I think all your close relationships, they will give you a very good sort of insight to who you really are as a person. And I think expressing. Second thing is really, I think, as in the masculinity zone, we tend to not express as much. We express anger very easily. frustration very easily, all kinds of negative emotions very, very easily, but not love, not care, like, Jofin was saying. I think the whole notion of, I think you yourself is an example of what it could be. I believe, I think just being very, very aware of your everyday actions, very aware of how you are occupying a space, how you are talking to people, how your emotional engagement is with the world. I think all of those aspects come into play when you are actually dealing with this entire masculinity arena. So I would just say, start expressing more, start listening more, and also reflect more about your everyday actions and what you are doing and what you are not doing. This is that.
Thank you. Swastik?
Yeah. So it's for me. I will say that it's more about having more neutralized conversations, or having more neutralized approach, or I will say viewpoint towards various things, which will probably help us do away with the guilt conscience that we normally harbor. So be it a man or a woman in various aspects, if they are questioned about many of these choices and all, so there is a lot of guilt conscience that they carry, right? Because the environment becomes like that. So the more neutral conversations that we have, I think we will do away with that, and that will make a more far inclusive space, and as you said, so then that will be the time when we can actually break the mold.
Tarun?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's no one right way of doing it. I think the trick maybe is to be true to yourself first, and probably call out at every given point in time. Because a lot of people naturally behave and respond in the way these notions they have imbibed in themselves. I think to call out and have more conscious engagements about it. For example, what if I didn't behave or respond in a certain way, which was in alignment with me being a man, right? What if I didn't respond? How would you perceive something around that? To have those kind of dialogues and conscious conversations, something which is maybe the first step to sort of take into the kind of direction we want to lead us or guide us. I think that's one of the ways of approaching this.
Well, we had 4 different things. I mean, one spoke about just putting care at the center of it. One spoke about just being the change that you're wanting to see and just acting it out. One spoke about having dialogues, and the other talked about how to, for that to be the starting point of then evolving into the next steps. So as we had said, when we begin that, we understood that this is a manual, but the men here were not trying to mansplain anything to any other gender. The idea was to mansplain things to each other and kind of just understand from each other's perspective as men as to what can we do to be better allies. How can we really work together towards creating that extra space which men, by virtue of being men, kind of occupy, and how do we truly kind of understand that, recognize that, and maybe take that step as all of us spoke about, all the panelists spoke about, of love, care, empathy, compassion, and creating those voices for conversation. In FIA, we strongly believe that we really need to kind of examine these privileges, and hence this entire thing has been a very small effort in pushing that envelope in that direction, where the idea is to create more such spaces for open, vulnerable conversations, and to promote that it's okay to be open, it's okay to be authentic, it's okay to be emotional, and it's okay to kind of share that, okay, we haven't done great in that arena till now, but we are learning. But again, thank you so much. I think it has been a really engaging in an interesting conversation. Some really interesting points came in. I again thank all the 4 panelists to take out time on a weekday evening and agreeing to do this. One thing which I would like to share with all the audience, that it did not take too much to kind of convince any of them. They all were so keen to kind of come on and kind of share their own experiences, which also is a testament to show that how they as individuals have also evolved in this journey when it comes to understanding gender and working towards, as I said, becoming better allies. So thank you so much, Swastik, Jofin, Rajesh, and Tarun. We will kind of continue engaging with you as we move forward with the campaign and our work in general.